Hello and welcome. We're breaking stories from outside Africa. We begin in Britain, where a British soldier who lost his life while on duty in Ukraine has been named as Lance Corporal George Hooley of the Parachute Regiment. Now, the Ministry of Defense confirmed the 28-year-old was killed in a tragic accident while testing a new defensive capability away from the front lines. No other British personnel were harmed. Now, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said in a statement that he was sending his deepest sympathy and condolences to the family of the member of their armed forces who sadly lost their lives today.
Mr. Speaker, the whole House will join me in sending our deepest sympathy and condolences to the family and loved ones of Lance Corporal George Hooley of the Parachute Regiment, who died yesterday in Ukraine. Lance Corporal Hooley was injured in a tragic accident away from the front lines while observing Ukrainian forces testing a new defensive capability. His life was full of courage and determination. He served our country with honour and distinction around the world in the cause of freedom and democracy, including as part of the small number of British personnel in Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, I place his name on record today to express our gratitude and respect and to affirm that his service will never be forgotten.
Away from that, China is strongly dissatisfied with and firmly opposes Britain's practice of political manipulation under the guise of cybersecurity and has lodged stern representations in Beijing and London, said Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Guo Zhikun on Wednesday. Guo made the remarks at a daily news briefing when commenting on the report that the British government on Tuesday announced sanctions against two Chinese companies, claiming that the relevant companies had launched cyber attacks against Britain and its allies and that their actions were related to the Chinese government.
中方坚决反对并依法打击黑客活动，同时坚决反对出于政治目的散布虚假信息。中方对英方借网络安全问题搞政治操弄的做法表示强烈不满，坚决反对，并已经在北京和伦敦向英方提出严正交涉。网络安全是全球共同挑战，我们敦促英方立即纠正错误做法，摒弃双重标准和政治化图谋，以真正负责任和建设性的态度，与中方共同维护网络空间和平、稳定与繁荣。
Away from that, U.S. President Donald Trump veers from the economy to a wide range of global and domestic issues during remarks at Mount Airy Casino Resort in Mount Pocono, Pennsylvania, declaring tariff his favorite word during periods of time. He is also warning that Europe is being destroyed by immigration and energy policies and saying that he can end renewed fighting between Cambodia and Thailand with a single phone call.
A lot of bad things are happening to Europe. You know that their immigration policies are so bad. It's so bad. They're destroying our beautiful Europe. I love Europe. They're destroying Europe, and they better do something. I'll give them just some free advice. I'm focused here, but I give them free advice. They better be careful because immigration and energy are going to destroy Europe. On day one, I ended the war achieved in 8 years, and we're restoring law and order to our cities, backing the men and women of law enforcement. I love law enforcement. And standing with the heroes of ICE and Border Patrol. We've ended political correctness in our military. We've renamed the Department of Defense into the Department of War.
The Nobel Peace Prize Committee chairman urges Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to accept his 2024 election defeat and resign. Now, this comes during Wednesday's Nobel Award ceremony honoring the country's opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado. Mr. Maduro, and she said, and I quote, "Mr. Maduro accepts the election results and step down," end quote. Chairman Jorgen Watney Fridays said in the speech.
This hall, with all the gravity that attends the Nobel Peace Prize and this annual ceremony, we will say what authoritarian's leader fear most. Your power is not permanent. Your violence will not prevail over people who rise and resist. Mr. Maduro, accept the election result and step down. Lay the foundation
Rising tensions in East Africa have taken a dangerous turn as Japan has launched or lodged a strong protest after Chinese J-15 fighter jets locked targeting raiders on Japanese aircraft near Okinawa, an act widely viewed as a potential pre-attack signal. Now, Beijing denies the allegation, accusing Tokyo of harassment during what it calls a routine training exercise. This confrontation comes amid sharpening rhetoric over Taiwan, disputed islands in the East China Sea, and a growing military presence on both sides. Now, the diplomatic rift is now spilling into daily life, from cancelled film screenings to curb on travel and trade. Well, joining me to speak more on this is Yemi Fajemisin. He's a geopolitics analyst in Glasgow, UK. Thank you so much, Yemi, for joining us at this time.
Thank you for having me, Dashin. Thank you.
All right, so let's begin with regional security. What does the raider-looking incident signal about, military posturing of China and Japan in the East China Sea, and how close, are both sides, to a miscalculation that could spark a conflict?
Well, yeah, there's an historical background to this. Taiwan used to be occupied by Japan from around 1865 till around the end of the Second World War, after which China took over control of Taiwan. So this dispute, or this diplomatic sparks, I would say, originated after the new Prime Minister of Japan, who is a nationalist and a hardliner, Prime Minister Takachi, said that if any attacks happen in Taiwan by China, and Japan won't hesitate to deploy its armed forces. So that kind of annoyed the Chinese, and they saw that as a red line. So they saw that as a form of Japan interfering in their domestic activities. So in terms of the radar question you asked there, I think on a general scale, locking a radar like that is seen as an hostile move by many countries. Yeah. Even under NATO in EU, the rules of engagement in NATO see things like that as an act of hostility. So is one of those things where it could be resolved diplomatically. We've seen that happen before around 2022 between Turkey and Greece as well. They had a form of a diplomatic issue around the locking of radar, which at the end of the day, it got resolved diplomatically. And you see cases where some of these things happen and some of the jets end up going to their base, returning to their base, with ambassadors being called by both countries to resolve it. So it does happen. It's seen as an act of hostility between countries, but at the end of the day, it gets resolved diplomatically. So I don't see any further, maybe major escalation happening on the back of the locking of radar. It does happen from time to time, hostility, and it gets resolved diplomatically as time goes by.
All right, now speaking of, hostilities, how about the growing militarization around Taiwan, influencing Japanese defense policy and its relationship with the United States in the region?
Well, it's an interesting one. We know the US has an air base around Japan. In fact, the air base is around 650 kilometers around the coast of China. We also know that Japan has got a good defense relationship with the US. In fact, around 2022, Japan decided they promised they were going to spend more on their defense spending, around the 2% of their GDP. And so, and obviously, when they say things like that, most of it comes from America. So if you look at the Korean Peninsula as a whole, so you've got this North Korea posing as a threat there. You've got China as well. So that means the US's defense is airtight around that region. We also, about some time ago, the US ambassador to Japan said on X that the US is committed to defend Japan at all costs, which says to us that Japan has a very good relationship with the US. And we must also remember that the US has also got a large military base in South Korea. So the defense pact between Japan around the Korean Peninsula to the US is quite it's a big one.
All right. Now, still speaking on Japan, speak to us on, the fact that Japan is lodging protests and Beijing is accusing Tokyo of harassment. How effective is diplomacy in diffusing such tensions? And are there tools that exist to even prevent this type of escalation?
Well, yeah, thanks for that. I think the best tool in things like this still remains diplomacy, to be honest with you. The good thing about this situation between Japan and China is the Prime Minister of Japan, for a good reason, has kind of dialed. She's speaking soft now compared to before. So what she said so far is she's going to avoid speaking about Taiwan in future engagement. However, she refused to take back what she said before, and the Chinese wanted her to actually do a retract of what she said before. She's refusing to do that, but she's promised that she's not going to be engaging in any future remarks as per Taiwan in this context. So to me, that's a signal that the tensions are beginning to diffuse. And I'll suspect from that statement, there'll be background or back channel diplomatic talks going on between two countries to resolve the situation. So it's one of those things where talks will still keep going on, diplomacy and countries talking to each other, particularly back-end channel diplomacy, I think is still the key into resolving these things.
All right, so but what about the civilian impact? How are the escalating tensions affecting ordinary citizens? Because you talked about, back-end, diplomatic, whatever. I'm talking about travel restrictions, trade curbs, and even cultural exchanges, like I read in the news, like the movies and also the concerts that they cannot go to. How is it affecting civilians' daily lives?
It does. It's affecting, because one thing we should remember is China does what we call a doghouse diplomacy in the diplomatic war. That's what China does. And what that means in layman's terms is, because China is a superpower when it comes to trade, they use that leverage to punish offenders. So what China has done so far is they've advising their students to stop schooling in Japanese schools, even tourism. They are advising the people not to visit Japan, and they are stopping importation of Japanese seafood, and also they're taking off Japanese movies from Chinese cinemas. So a combination of all these things is going to lead to a business loss of over $14 billion to Japan. So it's a big deal. And China does that from time to time when they use the economic leverage to punish offenders, called the doghouse diplomacy. So we hope as time goes on, tensions will begin to diffuse. But as we stand for now, in terms of restrictions to civilians, it's quite it's a severe one, with China advising their citizens to stop traveling to Japan. And that's going to have a huge impact on the Japanese tourist industry.
You've actually spoken about diplomacy quite a lot, on this conversation. But what about the international implications? What role do other regional and global powers like the US, South Korea, and Asian nations, play in stabilizing or even potentially inflaming this situation?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because South Korea and Japan used to have a bitter or not so good relationship. And the reason is because, South Korea was colonized by Japan. So there's some bitter tensions there from the colonial era when it comes to compensation relating to atrocities. But that's got better now. So the relationship between South Korea and Japan is actually better now. And when it comes to the Asian international body there, although Japan is not part of the Asian community, but one of the principle or the purpose of the Asian member states is to foster economic growth and security stability. So I will imagine they will want that economic security stability to come across the board in the Asian continent as a whole. Yeah. So I think in terms of the role the 11 members of the Asian community will play, they're probably going to be doing some back-end diplomacy as well, speaking to their friends in China, speaking to their friends in Japan to diffuse tension. So in terms of the international community dynamics there, I would believe everybody wants peace across the board, because the Korean Peninsula can be very flammable when you have North Korea and China in that mix there. So I don't think anybody wants anything to escalate.
Well, that is your idea, saying you don't think anybody wants anything to escalate, but I think we know better. So, Yemi, just before we wrap up, let's look at the risk assessment, given repeated incidents and sharper rhetoric. How realistic is the threat of a military confrontation, and what measures can Japan or even China take to manage airspace conflicts safely?
Well, as we've been speaking, the best way is just to keep the tensions down. The Prime Minister of Japan has done the right thing by promising not to make any further remarks when it comes to Taiwan. So I think that will calm things down for the Chinese. And in terms of making sure the airspace is safe, I'm not a military expert, but it all boils down to communication. I mean, countries do have all these military drills from time to time, whether it's a military drill in the air, in the sea, on the land. These things happen from time to time. However, before they happen, communication is always very fundamental, just to make sure there's no accident or any form of mishap or any escalation in terms of the airspace. So the logic is just to open the communication channel, and hopefully we won't see any escalation. So it all boils down to one word: communication.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Yemi Fajemisin, for joining us and speaking to us on this.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure.